Hi, good afternoon. Wait, let me check. Am I on mute? Yes, I did. Okay, sorry. All right. Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. I know some of you are joining us from the other part of the world. So yeah, welcome to HealthTEC BES Webinar. I'm Kate from Singapore Health Technologies Consortium, or HealthTEC in short. Just a little bit about HealthTEC. It is a national platform supported by National Research Foundation to develop and translate technological innovations that will transform health and wellness in the areas of sensing technologies, analytics, and artificial intelligence. HealthTEC also promotes interactions and collaborations across academia, industry, and government agencies. The consortium is currently hosted at the Institute for Health Innovations and Technologies at the National University of Singapore. If you want to know more about HealthTEC, later on I will include the link in the chat box. All right, so for today's event, there will be two hosts, myself and Catherine from Biomedical Engineering Society Singapore, who will be hosting the second half of the webinar. And we have two speakers who will be sharing the role of cybersecurity in digital health, impact of regulations, and discuss new techniques that modern research in cryptography and data security can offer to protect healthcare data. Just for your information, after each speaker has presented, there will be a Q&A session, 15 minutes Q&A sessions that will be followed right after. So if you have any questions for each speaker, please use the Q&A function you see at the bottom of your screen. All right, so now I will introduce you to our first speaker. He is Dr. Vasily Sidorov. He is a founder at Aprismatic, a data security startup based in Singapore, and he is a researcher at the School of Computer Science and Engineering at Nanyang Technological University, Singapore. He holds Masters of Science in Applied Mathematics, as well as Masters of Science in Management from Lomonosov Moscow State University, Russia. And he is a PhD in computer science from Nanyang Technological University, Singapore. His research interests include secure and privacy-preserving methods of data management, curability of encrypted data, secure, collaborative, and federated machine learning. So with that, let's welcome Dr. Vasily Sidorov. All right, I'm going to stop sharing the screen. So Vasily, you can share your slides.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Let me quickly share my slides. Okay. Can you see my slides?
Not yet.
Okay, sorry.
It's all right.
Just a second.
Yeah.
You can see it now.
Yes, yeah, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. All right, so let me start. And the title of my talk is Modern Cryptography on Healthcare Data's Secret Service. And before I start, I would like to talk a little bit about the data and about how much data became pervasive in every industry and every aspect of our lives. So everything we do has some kind of digital footprint, and this digital footprint is being collected, whether we like it or not, by almost all organizations around us. And some of them do it on smaller scale, some of them do it on larger scale. Some of them do this with intent, and some others just have to do this because this is the basis of their operations. And in particular, of course, in healthcare, there's a lot of data that is associated with us, starting from personally identifiable data, such as names, addresses, phone numbers, email address, and so on, to our medical data, which could be our healthcare history, our diagnosis, our whatever procedures that were performed, and all of that. So all of this information is collected, and of course it's required to have this information to keep it. But also there is a ever-growing risk of this information being leaked if proper security measures are not in place. And unfortunately, This happens more and more often. If we take a look at the news, there is a lot of news related to data leaks and data breaches happening all the time. And the further along we are, the more of this news are there on larger scale. These data breaches happen and more people get affected by that. And this affects the people whose data is being leaked, because these people become at the risk of scams, of targeted advertising, of identity theft, of blackmail. If something that was leaked is very personal, and they really don't want the public to know about that. And of course, this also is a huge risk for companies who have to, or any kind of organizations, not private companies in particular, but any kind of organizations who operate the data, because they face not only reputational risks, but also monetary risks in fines and compensations for these data breaches. And the breaches happen more and more often. So by our estimates, several years ago, 2018, every socially active person was a victim of 1 or 2 data leaks per year. Some lucky ones maybe didn't have any data leaks associated with them. 2019, everybody was a part of at least a couple of data leaks in the year. And then it was 2020, 2021. This happens more and more often on a larger and larger scale. Every one of us is a victim of several data leaks every year. This year could be 5 or 10 data leaks that would happen, that would affect everybody in this room, everybody in this webinar, and everybody generally who leaves any kind of digital footprint. If you go to work, if you use public transport, if you pay in the store, we all leave some data everywhere. And these data leaks are expensive for organizations that suffer from this, that suffer the data breaches. So it is estimated that it's on a scale of millions of dollars per data leak for large-scale organizations. And if we divide it by the number of people whose data was leaked, it could be quite expensive as well, especially if we talk about medical records. That's quite expensive for companies to leak that. And unlike a common belief, hackers who come from the outside and hack into the IT infrastructure and they break the firewalls and do all that, that's not the #1 reason for data leaks. #1 reason is actually misconfigured IT infrastructure, when this data is just being left publicly accessible or very easily accessible. And it does not require the hackers to possess any particular skills or any specific skill set to access them. It's usually very easy to do because somebody forgot to change the password, or somebody forgot to set the password, or somebody forgot to hide the database in the internal perimeter and left it accessible through the internet, things like that. #2 is insider threat. It's a threat coming from people who actually have access to this data based on their role in an organization. If their job involves working with this data, accessing this data, usually this is a #2 source of data leaks. People take the data, people sell it for various reasons. Sometimes money is involved, sometimes it's some kind of vengeance against the employer who they deem was unfair to them. The reasons could be different, but #2 reason for data leaks is insider threat. And only on the 3rd place are there external attackers, hackers who actually use specific tools and skills to hack through the defenses and extract the data. And there is also additional source of risk for data. Not only we have to be prepared to protect the data that is stored within our organization, more and more often we have a need, so companies have a need to share information across organizations so that they are able to perform some kind of higher level analysis on the data, on the joint data coming from different sources. So this could be some kind of epidemics analysis. It could be clinical trials analysis when the clinical trials is administered by multiple agencies. It could be fraud detection and so on. And this brings a whole new level of additional risks to of data leaks, because not only now we have this data in our infrastructure, but it also is shared with somebody else. Now we also have to worry about somebody else who is in possession of our data for them to take good care of it. So just to protect the data is some of the approaches that are listed on this. So we will try to protect the data and protect our IT infrastructure using access control, encryption of data that is stored on the disks, logging everything that's happening so that we can do some kind of audit and forensics later on, intrusion detection, network segregation. All of these are traditional approaches to cybersecurity in large organizations. And all of that, this is something that is often referred to as so-called fence security. Basically, we're trying to build some kind of fence or a wall around all of our data, around the whole infrastructure, and we try to make this wall, well, as impenetrable as possible. And usually when we try to do that, when we try to protect our organization's data in such a manner, this is what we think our wall looks like, or in our wildest dreams, maybe we think that this wall looks like this. But unfortunately, more often than not, the wall actually looks more like this, or this, or this. And the reason for that is the ever-growing size of our IT infrastructure. What worked 10, 15, 20 years ago when we had maybe 20 or 30 servers and overall of a couple hundred gigabytes of data, it was possible to build a good perimeter defense around our system. But today, when in many large organizations, we have hundreds of thousands of servers and petabytes of data, and all of this is distributed through different on-premise locations, maybe across countries, across borders. Some of that is on-premise, some of that is in the cloud. And the architecture becomes fluid, so we don't always know even how many servers exactly we have. Our systems are able to automatically scale up and down, automatically spin up new servers in the cloud and spin them down when they're not needed. It became ever harder to build a good perimeter defense around such a complex system. So we need to find some new approaches that would either complement or substitute the traditional approaches so that we can keep up with the growing complexity of our systems. And this is what I'm going to talk about today. I want to introduce some of the techniques that can help us on this journey. And these techniques that I will talk about today are oblivious data processing, federated learning, and audit trail and event sourcing. So let's start with oblivious data processing. And in particular, I'll talk about three concepts: secure multi-party computation, homomorphic computations, and distributed tokenizations. So we'll start with secure multi-party computations, and this concept comes in helpful in the scenarios that I mentioned before when we want to share the data across several organizations, across several sources, and run some kind of joint aggregation analysis. Usually when we do that, the problem is that, especially in the area of healthcare, we often are not allowed, we're not at liberty to share the data with anybody else because the data is extremely sensitive. It contains personal information, contains health records, and all of that. So SMPC is a set of techniques that is targeted at solving exactly these problems. Under SMPC, owners of data exchange, they don't exchange the data itself, they create specifically crafted shards of data, and they exchange these shards. And every shard reveals nothing about the original data. So if somebody is given a shard of your data, they cannot restore any information about what was originally there. However, the way these shards are created facilitates joint processing and analysis of that data. So it looks something like this. So here are 3 participants in this network, in this example, and everybody split their data into 3 shards and gave 2 shards to the other 2, and then kept the 3rd shard to themselves. So everybody now possesses 1 shard from every participant of this network. And now the way the shards are created, they can do some kind of joint analysis on this data. And I'll give you an example of how, in particular, this could work. This would be a very simplified example, but it should illustrate how secure multi-party computations work. So let's assume that we have 3 analysts from 3 hospitals, Alice, Bob, and Eve, and they want to know how many total patients these 3 hospitals have altogether. But of course, they don't want to reveal this information. They don't want any other hospitals to know how many patients are in their hospital. So assume we have 3 of them, and they have, for simplicity, 4, 3, and 7 patients in their hospitals. So we take these numbers, 4, 3, and 7, and we create these shards of information. In this particular case, we would create shards that would be just 3 numbers that add up to the number of patients in the hospital. So, for example, in the case of this hospital, there's 4 patients, and with shards are 1, 1, and 2. 1 plus 1 plus 2 is 4. Here we have 3 patients, and we have 5 plus 2 minus 4. That's 3. So this is how we create shards in this particular case. And then out of these 3 shards, each one of them, they keep 1 for themselves, and they give 2 other shards to the 2 hospitals in the network. So they exchange these shards in this particular way. And every shard reveals nothing about the original data. So one of the shards is even -4. So they are completely random, and they are not related to the original number of patients in the hospital. So it's impossible to restore this information from the shard that you receive. So, for example, this hospital received a shard that had a value of 2 from this hospital, and this number 2 doesn't tell them anything about the number of patients in that hospital. So, and in this example protocol, what they will do is they will add all the shards that they collected. They will add them together, and then they will exchange the results and add the results together as well. So if we add these 3 intermediate sums together, we will see 14. And everybody in the network, they know, so everybody in this network, they now know the number 14, which is actually the total number of patients. But none of them knows anything about the number of patients in the other hospitals. So in this particular case, this protocol let them achieve their goal to learn this number, and probably everybody benefited from this, and none of them learned anything about the information of other hospitals. So this is a situation where everybody wins by sharing this information, and nobody revealed anything, nobody is at any loss, and nobody incurred any additional risk to their data. And of course, this can be applied to all kinds of data, not only numbers. It could be applied to even more complex types of data, and it facilitates joint analysis on much larger data pools than every individual organization is able to do. So secure multi-party computations, they are distributed in nature. So this works when there are several sources of data. It doesn't have to be different organizations. It could be different departments of the same organization. It could be different branches, for example, in different jurisdictions of the same organization, and they could be forbidden, even though it's the same organization, it could be forbidden from sharing the data across borders. So it could help in situations like this. And SMPC can execute in highly untrusted environments. the data is secure if all but one node is compromised. So if at least one node is safe, is secure, then the data is impossible to restore. This property is so-called N-1 security. However, and SMPC also, it's able to execute any kind of analysis. So anything that you might want to do with data could be done using SMPC. So it's very versatile, but comes at a price. It's not fast, and speed directly depends on the number of nodes in the network. The more nodes, the more agents there are, the slower will be the analysis. The next on our journey is homomorphic cryptography, and this is a special kind of cryptography that allows you to encrypt data without revealing and be able to operate on this data, run some kind of analysis over encrypted data without decrypting or revealing this data. And it's best shown in an example. So let's, any crypto system consists of two operations. One is encryption, when we transform the original data into encrypted form, and decryption, when we take the ciphertext and decrypt it back to plain text. So let's assume we have this very simple crypto system, which is number 5. And when we want to encrypt a number, we multiply it by 5. And when we want to decrypt the number, we divide it by 5. And if nobody knows the secret key 5, they cannot guess on this, based on ciphertext, what is the original number. So it's a very simple sample crypto system. And let's say we have these two numbers, 7 and 5, that we want to store in our IT infrastructure. This could be a number of patients or a number of doses of a treatment that was administered to patients or anything like that. And before we save them, we encrypt this data with our crypto system. And so we just multiply it by 5, and we store the ciphertext instead of the original numbers. So now if somebody gains access to IT infrastructure, they can look at this, but they would not be able to figure out the original values if they don't know the secret key, which they don't know, and we do not store it on the same IT infrastructure. And we can run some kind of analysis. For example, we can learn what's the total number of whatever these numbers represent, and we can add ciphertexts without decrypting them. We can ask our IT infrastructure to perform this kind of aggregation. And again, the result, the adversary would not be able to decipher without knowing the key. So even if they go past the defenses and they get access to the IT infrastructure and they can see the data there, they would still not be able to figure out what this data stands for. And then we would be able to apply our decryption function, divide this by 5 and get 12, which is actually the sum of 5 and 7. So we are able to recover the result of our aggregation analysis. So this is what homomorphic cryptography is. Very straightforward approach. It, again, of course, comes at a cost of higher computation requirements, higher computation resource requirements, but makes it possible to store and operate data in encrypted form. So even if adversary gets direct access to the data, they would not be able to figure out what the original data was. Then we have distributed tokenization, which is also an approach which is helpful in situations when we want to share data across organization. This could be useful in epidemics analysis, insurance fraud detection, clinical trials analysis, and so on. We want to combine data sets coming from different sources, but the data sets contain sensitive information, personally identifiable information such as NRIC and so on. And in order to join this data, we need to somehow mask this values. So let's say we have records such as this with NRIC of the person, and we need to mask the NRIC. We cannot send the data with NRIC in plain text to anybody. This is forbidden by regulations, and this is not safe. So we want to somehow mask it, transform it into some kind of random token which is not associated with the original person. But we still want to be able to join this data. We want to be able to tell that these two records belong to the same person, even if we don't know who this person is. So we actually want to somehow tokenize this personally identifiable information in a way that it's tokenized in the same way by everybody in the group. And this is actually harder done than is said. And we were working on this problem for quite a while. We managed to develop a protocol that is cryptographically secure and is facilitating this kind of tokenization, where different organizations can tokenize PII without revealing this PII to anybody else in the same manner. And then they can send this data for joint analysis, aggregation analysis, for example, fraud detection, epidemics analysis, and so on. So these are the three prominent techniques of oblivious data processing. Then we have federated machine learning. So machine learning or artificial intelligence is a field of computer science that studies how computers can help people in complex decision-making, in reasoning, in finding patterns and relations in large volumes of data. And this has wide applications in healthcare. It's great for diagnostics. Sensors, we have phones, we have watches, smartwatches with all kinds of sensors. We can collect all kinds of data about ourselves for prolonged periods of time, and this all could be used to create more personalized treatments. Drug manufacturing, discovery, clinical trials, radiotherapy. We can create much less harmful radiotherapy sessions using machine learning and AI. Electronic health records, at least in digitalization of regular health records, machine learning could be of a large help. Epidemic prediction, which would be really helpful based on what we see in our reality today. All these areas and some others probably could greatly benefit from machine learning and AI. But all machine learning and AI approaches have something in common. They require data, and they require lots of data. And this is a problem, especially in sectors such as healthcare, where data contains very sensitive, very personal information, and we just can't put together large pools of data across organizations to create even better machine learning models. And this is the problem. This is a problem because in classic machine learning, what happens is we take the data from different sources and we pull it all together. And then in this central repository of data, we process it and we create a model based on all this data. However, federated learning is an approach that is targeted exactly at fighting this problem. And instead of putting all the data together, we create smaller components, smaller portions of a large model locally using only local data. And this could be done using servers in organizations and even using personal devices of patients or healthcare workers that also collect some data. And this data could be used, could be fed into this larger model. So instead of creating one large model based on all the data altogether, we create a number of smaller pieces of the model locally, and then we submit these pieces of the model to a central repository, and then there they are recombined to a large model. So the result is more or less the same as with traditional approach, but the data never changes location. We never share the data. So this could greatly help in industries, especially such as healthcare or finance, where we have to operate very sensitive data in nature. And last topic that I'd like to give an overview of is audit trail and event sourcing. So in a classic approach, what is usually done, applications and systems in our IT infrastructure, they all keep a log of events that happen in the applications, in the systems, in the devices. And these logs are sent to a centralized security information and event management system, or SIEM. And this is a classic approach. There are almost any organization has in infrastructure that is set up in this way. And what we do is everything that is in our IT infrastructure collects data. And this could be applications, computers, and even devices such as printers or sensors or CCTV cameras, all of that. All of that records events that they deem are useful to record, and they send them to a SIEM system. And then we can run analysis over this. We can run audit, forensics, all kinds of analysis over this centralized, combined, aggregated logs. The problem with this approach is, first of all, logs can be amended. Yes, we put them in a centralized storage, but a sophisticated attacker could amend the logs and clean up after the data breach so that it would be impossible to spot that they were ever in the system. A less sophisticated attacker who cannot fix the logs in a believable way can try to delete the logs. At least they would not be able, the security team would not be able to tell what exactly happened, even if they can tell that there was a breach. So they could be amended. And also we have some kind of arbitrary log granularity. And this means that different systems, different applications, different devices, they decide on their own what to log. And sometimes they might omit crucial information. They might not log something that would be required to uncover what happened, but this unfortunately was just not logged in the system. But at least it's better than nothing, and most companies still do this, and it is helpful in many cases. But in some cases, in cases of more advanced attackers, it's not as helpful as it could be. So what could be done to mitigate these two issues? So first, the logs can be amended. That's problem number one. So what can we do to create an immutable and unforgeable logs, something that cannot be changed by the attacker or deleted? So requirement for a system that possesses this quality is, well, it has to have distributed storage so that even if we deleted one node, we would still have other nodes. We need strong guarantees of immutability and unforgeability, and probably preferably cryptographic guarantees of these properties. And as it turned out, there is a very popular technology today that possesses exactly these properties and is ideal for this kind of application. This technology is called a blockchain, which is a distributed ledger with cryptographic guarantees of immutability and unforgeability. So this is exactly what can help in situations like this. So first thing that could be done is these SIEMs, they could start to use blockchain as an underlying technology for storing the logs. Then the second problem was that logs might omit crucial information, and we might want to be able to recover what happened, but we just don't have enough information. And this is what gives rise to the concept of event sourcing. So first thing that we might want to do is, what if we actually make sure that we always have the information that we need in the logs? And then we can make one step further, and we say, what if all the information that we have is logs? What if there is nothing else but the logs? And this is what's the core concept of the idea of event sourcing, that everything we store is just the logs of changes to information instead of storing the information itself. And the best analogy for that is how we usually store information about chess games. Instead of drawing a board for every position of the chess figures on the board, instead, what we do, we keep a log of all the changes to the chessboard. And if we add timestamps to this, we can figure out exact state of the chessboard at any point in time. So if we want to see what was at this point of time, we can just re-execute all the changes to the board and get here from the starting position when all the chess pieces are in the initial positions. Then we can see what was a minute before or a minute after that, and so on. So this same idea applied on a larger scale to the data sets of whole organizations. This is something that could be very useful. It would give you full knowledge of all the states of your data at any point of time, and there would be nothing could be unnoticed because everything is always logged and everything you have is logs. This seems like a bit of an outlandish idea, but actually there are organizations that are basing their data infrastructure on this concept. So to summarize, I gave an overview of several approaches of new techniques in data security that could be applied today and that should be applied today, because if we want to keep up with the changing landscape of IT, of data security, we need to adopt new technology. And we at Aprismatic, in collaboration with Nanyang Technological University, we are researching and developing products that are based on this new ideas, and we can help and consult on how this could be applied in different organizations, different settings, and so on. That's all. Thank you very much. I think I went a couple minutes over my time, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. If there's any questions, I would be glad to answer them.
All right. Thank you very much for the insightful talk. All right. So now we'll move on to the 15-minute Q&A session with you. So everybody, if you have any question, please use the Q&A function you see at the bottom of the screen. We will start off with the first question that we see in here. So it says, what's the difference between federated machine learning and distributed machine learning?
Right. So it says somebody would like to answer this question.
Oh, it's Gordon.
Okay, I'll give my take at that. So
yeah.
To the best of my knowledge, the terminology is a little bit fluid here. Sometimes this means the same things, and sometimes they could mean slightly. Sometimes it's the same. Federated and distributed machine learning. Sometimes they mean slightly different things in different approaches. So usually federated is more targeted at keeping the data at its original location so that it does not travel from the original data owner. The only thing that is going out from the original data owner is this portion of the model, part of the model, but not the data. So federated learning is slightly more targeted at keeping the privacy of the data. Maybe it's not the intent necessarily all the time, but that's the effect. Whereas distributed is more targeted at splitting the computational resource among different parties. So it's less targeted at keeping the data in the same location and more targeted at using the network effect, basically using computational resources coming from different participants instead of putting it all in one very large, very powerful server. So basically trying to substitute this one very expensive and powerful server with 1,000 laptops or with 10,000 laptops.
I see. Thank you for answering the question. We have a couple more here. It says, can you please elaborate on using blockchain as underlying technology under SIEM2? What are the possible benefits due to this?
Right. So blockchain as technology, blockchain, it's very popular right now and it's very buzzworthy. So a lot of things are attributed to blockchain that are not necessarily inherent to blockchain. So what blockchain is, in fact, under all of this, is a database with very specific properties. And these properties include that it's distributed among a large number of participants, and there is guarantees of immutability, meaning that you cannot change what was written there, and unforgeability, meaning that you cannot fake something and says that something was written there unless it was actually written there. And this is achieved by using cryptographic signatures and a lot of different approaches, but it's basically what we can guarantee. As a trade-off, blockchains are usually much slower than traditional database systems. So, and a lot of research today in blockchain area is targeted at speeding it up because, for example, if we take the Bitcoin blockchain, is extremely slow. It can write one block every 10 minutes. So we have to wait at least 10 minutes for our data to appear in the blockchain, whereas traditional database can write thousands and thousands new data values per second. So there is this, but especially for situations such as audit trail and being able to recover what happened later for forensic investigation, blockchain with its properties of immutability and unforgeability is a great tool because we can trust what we see in this blockchain, and we cannot trust as much the data in a traditional database or a traditional file.
Okay. The next question we have is, what do you think on applicability of differential privacy in healthcare setting? Will it be future for things like wearables?
Well, differential privacy is a very powerful technique, but it's quite difficult to get it exactly right. So I think we will not see ubiquitous presence of differential privacy in all aspects. We will see it quite a lot, but there are some inherent problems with how difficult it is to manage and operate systems that are using differential privacy. So yeah, we will not see it everywhere, but we'll definitely see it to some extent.
Okay.
Hope that answers the question.
Yes, yep. There's one question that says, what are the specific requirements on things like heart sound, blood pressure data transferred to a patient via virtual platform during digital consultation conducted by general practitioner?
Oh, honestly, I think that this is less of a, I don't know if this is a data security question, then I'm not sure what angle exactly here, because this looks more like a administrative kind of question.
I see.
Specific requirements on sound pressure and blood pressure. If we talk about the data security of this, so security is I'm not sure, honestly, because this feels like this requires a lot of background knowledge in specific healthcare application, which I'm not.
Yeah, that's all right.
Very
Okay,
familiar with, yeah.
No problem. Yeah, there's just one question in the chat box, which I'm going to read out to you. How will quantum computing disrupt the crypto techniques you mentioned here?
Some of them will be, so quantum computing is coming, and probably we will see practical quantum computers in 10, 20 years. I'm not trying not to be overly eager about this and saying, oh, we'll see it in several years, but 10, 20 years, that's probably something that we can see. And yes, one of the side effects of emergence of quantum computing is that a lot of modern cryptography becomes obsolete because quantum computers can break a lot of modern cryptographic protocols. And some of them that I mentioned here might be affected. So not groups of them. So let's say SMPC, there are many different ways to do SMPC. Homomorphic cryptography, there's many different homomorphic crypto systems. Some of them will be affected, others will not. So it's just when quantum computing is there, we'll have to change some of the underlying algorithms, but it would not it should not drastically change the situation. The general techniques that I discussed today would still be available, maybe in a slightly changed way.
Great, thank you. We'll just have one last question before we move on to our second speaker. So the last question we have is, how do you foresee the use of blockchain and cloud for the sharing of electronic health records among hospitals, clinicians, and also empower patients to view his or her historical EHR, including images like X-ray, CT scan, also from the angle of security, privacy, and trust?
Well, blockchain is interesting because often when we say cybersecurity or data security, we actually have to realize that there are very different aspects or angles of data security. So some things may be secure from one angle and then insecure from another angle. In particular, in blockchain gives us a very good security. So we often refer to a golden triangle of data security in the community. And this golden triangle is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So confidentiality means that only authorized parties can read the data. Integrity means that whatever is being read is whatever was intended to be read. So nobody tampered with it, nobody changed it. And availability means that we can actually read it. And all three of them are important, and we have to focus on all three. We can't focus on just one or two of them, because let's say if we're focused only on confidentiality and not on availability, the best course of action is to delete the data, destroy it. It would be confidential forever. But that's not always what we want. So we have to focus on all three of them, maybe with different levels of priority. And technologies such as blockchain, they are really good at maintaining integrity and availability, but they quite often hinder the confidentiality because blockchain is distributed and public by nature. So if we put something on blockchain, yes, it's there forever, it's immutable, and it's undeletable, but it's also kind of public. So blockchain itself would not be able to solve this problem. It would probably be a part of a composite, more complex approach, and it's likely to do that because it's great to facilitate integrity and availability. But we would also need some additional other cryptography on top of that to make these records also confidential. So will blockchain be there? Yes, 100% or maybe 99% sure that blockchain will be a part of this system, but not the only part. There will be also other things, other safeguards to protect the privacy of data. But as facilitator of integrity, availability, and trust, blockchain is a great technology. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for answering all of our questions. And it was a really very insightful talk. So thank you for that. All right. Now we'll move on.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. All right. Now we'll move on to our second speaker. And I'm going to pass over to Catherine, who will be introducing you our second speaker for the day. Yep. All right, Catherine.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks. Yeah, our second speaker of the day will be Mr. Shrikant Iyer from Irritator, a Dutch company focusing on actually a world leader in digital platform security for quite a number of industries. And in fact, Mr. Shrikant is speaking from the Netherlands, and I believe it's Amsterdam. It's quite early in the morning right there. So currently, Mr. Shrikant his role currently is Business Development Director for healthcare and life science industry in the company. He leads the company's new connected healthcare cybersecurity business development, strategy and partnership across few regions, Asia, Europe, and North America. And before this, Mr. Shrikant was a certified regulator with the Singapore Ministry of Health and was actively involved in medical device technical evaluation. And Mr. Shrikant is also a homegrown graduate. He holds a master's in biomedical engineering from NTU, and besides that, an MBA from IMD Switzerland. So let me introduce you to Mr. Shrikant's talk, with the title Digital Health and MedTech, involving role of cybersecurity in healthcare. So, Mr. Shrikant.
Yes, thank you, Catherine. Thank you so much. I hope everybody can hear me. And also thank you for the warm introduction. Let me share my screen. If you guys can see my screen, please let me know. All right. Is this second? Yeah. Is the screen visible?
Yes. I think you might want to change the setting a bit because we can see your next slide as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's the display setting at the top. Yeah.
Okay. Give me one.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. 1 second. Now.
Yes. Yeah. Perfect.
Now it's perfect. Okay. Cool. So thank you so much. A very good afternoon to everyone in Singapore. I'm joining from Europe. I'm in Amsterdam, like Catherine just introduced me. So firstly, I'd like to thank the organizers, the Biomedical Engineering Society, which I'm also a part of, and also my colleague Anla from HSA, and also Health Technologies Consortium for inviting me for the webinar. Let me also do, now, Catherine has already given an introduction for me, so I'll just skip through my slides. So I'll sort of cover a lot of information which Dr. Vasily gave today. So that was very interesting. Thank you so much. And I'll move from theory to action, to practical stuff, what is happening in the real world, and especially in healthcare, which is a very, very slow moving industry. So I'll go into digital and medtech and a lot of stuff. And before we deep dive into this topic of discussion, let me just tell you how do I sort of bring in some expertise. Catherine already introduced me. And so I bring in expertise from both public and private sector in the medical devices industry, especially in software and services, software as a medical device, and looking at process QMS and also medical device regulation. This is a very, very growing and evolving field. Even the regulators are learning day by day. So I will be talking about specific information and why am I capable of doing that right now, and from my personal experience as well. So the talk will be a little structured, and I'll get to it in the next slide. So since early last year, I'm part of Idato's new connected health team, which is overseeing cybersecurity, especially in this data and device security world we live in, to try and figure out how can we create turnkey solutions. So just a bit of background, Idato is actually a Dutch cybersecurity company, and it's been around in multiple industries, and it's a world leader in digital platform security. And Idato's software and technology actually protects 6 billion applications and devices. And we also happen to be the inventor of white box cryptography. So you heard a lot of cryptography in the last talk from Dr. Vasily, and I have been surrounded by a lot of cryptographers in the company. And it's an amazing technology and stuff, but when it comes to healthcare, things are really different practically. This is what I've learned so far. And Singapore, and coming to Idato, we have our offices in all the locations in world, 18 plus locations, and including Singapore. And what we do right now, my mandate is we are developing a medtech market portfolio, which includes both pre-market and post-market products that provide technical methods to mitigate cyber risk, enhance security capabilities of medical devices, ensure defense in depth, and assess clinical impact of these discovered vulnerabilities. It is a lot of information. I'll break down each of those as we go further in the talk today. And our services in this medtech space include security penetration testing, security audits, threat model construction, and many, many more. So these definitions will be a little out of the world for few people. So let me just get some information about before we move to the next slide, I'll sort of run a poll to try and figure out what is the audience. I'm just running the poll here, if you can see. Let's get this poll question on. We have 61 participants here right now, and it's live right now, and it's, let me just see. We'll give like another 30 seconds to just understand what is the maturity of the audience, what are the responsibilities, so I can sort of tailor a little bit technical information versus standardized information. I'll try and deliver something which is very practical and tangible, which you can take away and probably apply if you are a startup, or you work in a medical device in manufacturer, or even if you are an academic. So just to give, probably we take another 20 seconds. Can everybody see the poll? All right, we have 50% people have voted. Just to understand what is the maturity of the audience and the experience they bring in. We have 57% people who have voted. I hope people are awake. They have not fallen asleep on a Friday afternoon in Singapore. We wait for another, probably 20 participants have not yet voted, but if you can see on the screen right now, the majority are medical device and software development people. So I assume they are from the Biomedical Engineering Society and tertiary institutions. Only one participant from product security. That's the focus of the talk today. So that's good. We have few QA/RA people. And yeah, so then a lot of information which I'm going to talk about is actually very, very relevant to the audience here. All right, I think we can stop because it's been 2 minutes. All right, so I sort of got the audience profile here. So let's deep dive into the agenda. So I'll be covering 3 areas today. The first one, I've structured it in a way that it goes from low, medium to high. And the topics are on the introduction of what is digital health exactly, and how is it evolving, because it is something which it means different things to different segment of the population. Secondly, I'll be talking about cyber threats, how is it increasing in healthcare, and how the rise of connectivity in medical devices has contributed to it. And the third topic I'll be talking about will be understanding the cybersecurity principles, especially product and data security when it comes to medical device and software as a medical device, and go a little deeper in the design development stage. And we will also look into a bit of regulatory requirements, because this space is heavily regulated, and that's the whole difference between coming from any other industry to coming to a medical device industry. So those are the 3 broad topics, and I would like to give you some key takeaways because there's a lot of information here. So the first key takeaway or need for you, if you see that it's getting too overwhelming, just remember these 3 things. Firstly, do not think cybersecurity is an afterthought, because there's a lot of regulatory requirement for you to meet, and just don't think that I will fix cybersecurity at the end of my market access. Secondly, understand the importance of why do you need it? What is the importance of embedding cybersecurity into the total product lifecycle? And thirdly, how do you get started and continue throughout the product lifecycle? So these are the 3 key takeaways I'll sort of try to answer through the entire presentation. So let's get started. And before we get there, what exactly is digital health and how is it evolving? Now, healthcare is changing to more digital, more so in this new normal. The convergence of connectivity, data, and computing power for healthcare and its uses in nowadays has just gone way forward. So what has happened here is, 1 second, I can show the pointer here. Yeah. So what has happened here is healthcare is moving from individual, from clinic to the patient, and understanding this patient's behavior and physiology, and taking, if you look at, this is the total healthcare value chain, it is moving more towards this end because everything is now getting digital. And what has happened because of that is there is a lot of digital health technologies which have come in. And if I were to define this, FDA, the US FDA defines digital health that use computing platforms, connectivity, software, and sensors for healthcare and related uses. And these technologies span a wide range of uses, from applications in general wellness to applications into a medical device. Now, these technologies are intended, if you can see on the screen, as a medical product, number one, can be in a medical product, as a companion diagnostic, or as an adjunct to any medical product. It can be device, drugs, or biologics. And they can also be used to study or develop new medical products. Now, FDA has been very, very active about this convergence of medical devices with connectivity and consumer technology. And there are lots of topics in this digital health field which FDA has been working to provide clarity using practical approaches that balances benefits and risk. So the whole focus is to balance the safety and risk. Now, if I were to take this a little deeper, what exactly is digital health? Digital health is a broad umbrella term that covers a range of digital solutions that includes digital medicine, digital therapeutics, and digital therapy, which is therapy management for health that deliver health benefit directly to the patient or work directly to enhance the benefits of pharmacology therapy. Now, in this slide, if you can see, the level of complexity is going exponentially high based on the reward of the digital health solution. Now, if you were to see here, cybersecurity sort of starts very early as well, but the regulatory or the punitive action or the requirement to embed security into your devices or into your software slowly increase from here. And if you see here, the evidence of reimbursement, because this is where the payers reimburse for the solution, for the actual clinical outcome also increases. In contrast to digital wellness, which is here, and other, which is here, sorry. In contrast to digital wellness or digital marketing efforts, which is happening in healthcare, digital health solutions are intended to have an impact on the clinical and healthcare outcomes. More so, it is complex, and it is also a lot more regulatory, legal, and technical standards. So this is a very good balanced slide, especially for people who have technical understanding, to really understand where exactly are things moving, especially in this mental health space, digital therapeutics, the age we are living right now. Everybody is locked down, everybody is at home. This area has really shot up, and this is more software as a medical device, and I'll sort of deep dive a little bit more into what exactly can people do and from a cybersecurity perspective. Now, another way to look at it is through a very famous, and this is Gartner's hype cycle, and you have to read it from right to left, sorry. And how do you read this is, on the right-hand side, you have the plateau of productivity, means this has been already implemented. And you go from right to the left, and you realize that the ones which are blue dots, if you can see here, are something which was be implemented in the next 2 to 5 years. And the ones which are darker are the ones which is looking at 5 to 10 years, and anything triangle is just more than 10 years ago. What has happened in healthcare is, because of the pandemic, things have shifted quickly. Remote patient monitoring, which is now a norm has accelerated. And if you see more and more, there is a lot of sensors, there's a lot of digital health tools, which has grown very much. Now, if you see along this line, there is new things which are coming, which consumer health wearables is now, is becoming a norm, not so much more in the patient data connectivity, but not so much in the actual mainstream healthcare, but it is going towards there. There is digital clinical encounters, there is digital telepathology, there is algorithmic medicine, and there is a lot more. Virtual health, there is AR, VR. In fact, US FDA also has this category known as novel digital health, where a device or a product that includes new, unfamiliar, or unseen digital health technology, which has been never submitted, cleared, or approved by the FDA, they have an innovative platform for that. So things are moving really quickly in this landscape, and they're really evolving faster. And VR, gaming, most of these things. Due to this, what has happened is cyber threats and risk have really gone up. So let's do a short poll, the next poll, if you can see the next poll. Let me go to the next question. Just before we get into the next thing, why healthcare cybersecurity is really important, let's run a short poll. If you guys can see the poll. This is just to understand, what is your understanding of healthcare cybersecurity risk and threats, and if you're sleeping right now, please wake up. This is an interactive session, so I'll be running a couple of polls just to gauge what is your understanding, and so that I can share a bit more if we were to go a little deeper into regulatory affairs, or we stick to the practical healthcare applications. So just to understand, for your product, if you work in the medical devices or software as a medical device, or even in the broader pharma or healthcare delivery, what exactly is healthcare cybersecurity risk to you? So I see we have 50% of the audience here have voted, and most of them, if you see a cyber attack which damages the brand, that is the first one here, 45%, and regulatory actions and fines. Yes, that is always the case. People think of regulations. Just one person is not concerned, so I would like to talk to that one person who is not concerned, because everybody should be concerned. We heard about data in the last talk. I'll get into the data, I'll get into the product security shortly. All right, so that's a good information. Let me jump to the cyber threats. Now, what is happening is cyber threats are becoming more and more frequent, because the hackers can potentially cause severe risk to the clinical patient impact. And hacking is a business, let's not underestimate it. They're driven by the same goals as any other business: maximize revenue and minimize cost. Now, there's so much of things happening, right? This was the first medical device hack. I'll slowly shift into the medical device world, and so many, the ransomware has just taken off. In fact, in the first half of 2020, hundreds of hospitals have been affected. In fact, even a first patient death was reported in Düsseldorf in Germany, in a hospital. There's pacemakers, which is issues in the patches. There is warnings given by the US FDA. These are all vulnerabilities which were not taken care of and were exploited. There's a lot of security flaw. There is third-party vulnerabilities, which is a lot of such things. If you go to the US FDA website, or even if you go to the Singapore HSA, AEFSCA warnings, you'll get this information. And closer to us, we also had a patient privacy or a cyber attack which affected PM Lee's personal particulars, and there were a lot of information which was leaked out, and this included anything from his personal data, and this was specifically targeted again and again. And until in just June 2020, the cyber rate has gone up 300% in the pandemic. So it's very clear that this is a huge problem. Now, in Edato, we ran a survey recently, and we interviewed the big senior decision makers in this medical devices, digital health companies, and telemedicine, telehealth providers. We figured out that 88% of medtech executives are not prepared for cyber attack, and 80% of them have suffered at least one attack in the last 5 years. And the report also highlighted the cybersecurity pain points by portfolio type. Please feel free to download the report and get more insights into it. Now, why is this? Medical devices are a very, very, very easy target. Why exactly? Because medical devices, sorry if you can see my screen, yeah, medical devices are the easiest vector into an hospital network. And a hacker is actually looking, not just hackers, but anybody who is trying to explore that patient data, they go through medical networks, medical devices, and medical devices are very poorly secured. They are not designed for safety. They're not designed for security, my apologies, because they were never intended to be connected. And the updates mechanism, the patching mechanism is very slow. Again, there is regulations in place. Each update has to be verified for safety. And they also have highly clinical use, but they also have this patient sensitive personal data. So these are the reasons why medical devices are the easiest to get into a healthcare attack. Now, medical devices are just everywhere, from cradle to the grave. You can see almost a sort of medical device you use right now. You will not be aware of how much pervasive healthcare has become, but connected medical devices are on the rise. And it's just in one patient bed, there was a recent survey as well that at least there are 20 devices connected to a patient. And even right now, as things move towards home healthcare, there's so much of connectivity and so much of data, as well as so much of product information we share with the clinical people. We sort of lose track that so much of risk is on the plate. So why the connectivity is on the rise, right? There is just so much of connectivity happening right now in medical devices. In the past, there was no connectivity beyond hospital bed, but now devices are at people's homes. Sometimes it's connected all the times and everywhere you go. And this is led to obviously a lot of cybersecurity issues. 1 in 4 medical devices connected, and the telehealth and the IoMT space has just exploded. Now, the key part here is if any device or any of course, any device you have and it incorporates a software, you are vulnerable to cybersecurity threats. Let's get into what exactly does this mean. What is vulnerability? What kind of threats are we talking about? And jump into the third topic, which is the cybersecurity design phase, development phase, and the regulatory requirements. Now, when you start thinking about cybersecurity, why should you look at early design phase? And what should be the takeaway? What should be the first few steps you implement? Now, it all starts with risk management. And I think Dr. Vasily also mentioned about there is a difference between IT security, which is protection of hardware, software, and data services. And when it comes to medical devices, this is known as OT security, operational technology security, which is more product security, and it is more towards protection of procedures and workflows. Now, in cybersecurity, you have this popular CIA, which is the CIA triad in cybersecurity. But when it comes to medical devices, it's a little different. Now, in a traditional system, people are trying, the regulators as well as manufacturers are trying to reduce the harm, and they're trying to increase the benefits. Now, what happens is breach of data and system security is what people think about when it comes to cybersecurity. And in healthcare, right, you have a lot of more such things. You also have your devices to protect. You also have your data to look after, and you also have to make sure that it is safe and effective and delivering that therapy, whether it's a diagnostic or a therapeutic. So this balance is what is the difficult challenge in healthcare, where in IT security, you information security, you just go for protecting theft, deletion, alteration of anything, any data. And that sort of broader topic falls under PDPA in Singapore, which is done by MDA, or GDPR in Europe, which is very strict. But when it comes to medical devices, it is both data as well as device. Now, the topic I want to talk about in this case is the CIA triad, which is very popular. But when it comes to medical devices and software as a medical device in healthcare, you got to look at it differently. You got to start looking at availability, because availability is the first thing which is important. Because if your medical device is, and functionality, obviously, that is the key thing. It runs based on its intended use, and it is available, because availability is super critical. Integrity and confidentiality are also important, but not so much, because it's a balance which needs to be stricken. And that's where, when protecting medical devices, what do you start with? So you start with understanding the regulatory landscape. You start with your risk management, which is a 14971, which is a very popular standard, which is the base of any medical device regulatory evaluation. In that, you start with severity, harm, and probability of occurrence. But when it comes to security, it's a little different. You look at vulnerability, you look at threat. So I'll just start off by saying that always, for cybersecurity, start with risk management. And that's where it's very important, where people need to understand that risk analysis is a powerful tool for showing that you have thought about security and believe that the device is secure enough for the market. Now, core outcome of this is that there has been a lot of regulations, especially in FDA, you have trustworthy design. In EU, you have defense in depth. There is a lot of best practices which is thrown around, because addressing those security risks with patient safety impact. So if you see on the left-hand side, you have this Venn diagram where you have safety-related risk, which is what is traditionally looked at in the medical device arena, or software as a medical device space. And then you have this security risk. And now, when both of them intersect, the balance here is to look at this safety risk which has security risk, which has safety impact. All right. And safety risk management is more 14971, which combines the severity of harm, probability of occurrence. And in a similar way, using that same fundamentals, you expand the terminology. And that is where security risk management comes into play. Now, if you see again, the risk control measures are very important, which is probability of severity. But once you start looking at safety risk management, you need to start looking at also risk analysis, which impacts security. So if you see here, the graph just flows on the left-hand side. So this is an interplay of looking at risk evaluation from a security angle. And this is the first step when you start to look at cybersecurity or product security in your software. And there is 62304 software risk management as well, which assigns numerical score to assess the risk level. It's known as risk priority number. So in software security risk assessment, you replace the probability with the assessment of the threat level and vulnerability. So in safety risk management, you look at probability risk score, but in security risk management, you start to look at what is the threat level, what is the vulnerability which is attached to that threat level, and how can somebody exploit that vulnerability. So you need to look at those controls, and risk evaluation and the risk controls, if it is due to anything which is security related, it has to flow back to your risk analysis document, and then you may have mitigations for it in the usual risk management process. So this is the key concept which is new and which is evolving, which manufacturers are also learning. but regulators are driving this principle. So in summary, right, your approach to cybersecurity has to start from early medical device stage, development stage. And the main emphasis here is on secure lifecycle management of medical devices, vulnerabilities and disclosures, and making sure that security incident monitoring is on place. And you look at health, look at it from a very total product lifecycle approach. Again, cybersecurity is an executive mandate. It starts from the top because everybody is aware there is lots of threats, there's a lot of vulnerabilities. So if you are a startup or if you are a small medium enterprise, take initiative where you inbuild this culture of security by design pretty early. And cybersecurity, there's too many things, too many technical terms, encryption, hardening, authentication. These you need to translate when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to medical devices space, translate it. What is the next actionable step you need to take? And when you communicate to engineers, when you communicate to software development people, it has to be broken down because there's too many jargons and too many best practices and phrases which are there. And always the changes you need to look at from a total healthcare value chain perspective, looking at not just one impact, because cybersecurity is a shared responsibility. So you look at clinical impact, you look at organizational impact, financial, regulatory, and few actionable steps you can take is you have to quantify, because data driven and quantification is very important, because how the balance of safety and security in healthcare is very, very critical. So you can't have a lot of security measures enforced when the product doesn't even function. So that is very important, quantification, and also making sure you document each of these clearly. There are a lot of security technologies, encryption, there's a lot of monitoring solutions which are available. Try to get that incalculated or embedded into your system. Start with use cases, start to understand that it is risk management, and then you look at threat modeling, understanding what are the different threat vectors, and then continue this throughout, even in the post-market surveillance. So these are the critical stuff I would say is very important when it comes to cybersecurity. I'm touching very high level. This is just to give you a flavor of what is the practical steps required. And once you start looking at cybersecurity from an early design stage, it has to start from understanding, firstly, the regulatory requirements, but you also look at design input requirements for security in your early design phase. And this then goes to product design, where you apply system hardening standards, you look at third-party software components, and you do vulnerability scanning. So all these go hand in hand. And then you have design security as part of the design. You routinely identify, test, apply, and maintain those system patches for medical device or software as a medical device throughout the product lifecycle. And as I said, test continuously. And if you need help, because this is a lot of information, there is a lot of confusion among especially the developers versus what is the regulatory requirement, because it's a moving goalpost. And what exactly does the guidance documents give you? They are very descriptive and they're not very prescriptive. So it's open to interpretation. And that is where the challenges in cybersecurity lie, because a lot of information is sort of cryptic. You can do this, but it's left to the manufacturer. So the industry is now consolidating, and they've acknowledged that medical devices, cybersecurity cannot be an afterthought. When you start doing medical device development or software development, this applies to also digital health, because it is also considered as a medical device. You need to start thinking very early, and you need to acknowledge that threats and vulnerabilities will exist. You need to minimize this risk and threats. You can't eliminate it totally. And there are ways, there's process control, there are product controls, and there are ways to balance this. And this will always be a challenge, because the cybersecurity threats will always keep on increasing, but healthcare is always playing a catch-up. So it's all fun and good to learn that blockchain exists. There is a lot of cloud technology, but when it comes to healthcare, things are really slow, and it is because patients' life is at stake. So regulatory enforcements are very strict in healthcare. So you can see that there's a lot of data fines which happens in Europe and the US recently because of the HIPAA or the GDPR. But moving forward, you will also start to see that product related breaches increasing. So choosing security by design and embedding this as a culture into the organization is the first step. And in summary, making sure that security is built in from early design stage is a priority. Make sure that it is as executive mandate. Cyber attacks don't just happen to large companies. It can also happen to a startup, a small, medium enterprise. Even if you're a researcher, it's very important. Understand the threats. I would say this would be the key takeaway from the whole topic is, if you have anything which has software and it is connected to an external device or network, you need to include cybersecurity, and it has to be from conception to end of support. I often get this question, my device is not connected to anything, it is not, but it has software. Even if it is not connected to anything, if it has software, you need to build in cybersecurity, because there's so many ways that information as well as harm can be caused to your device. And at the end, there is a cost for security, but you need to maintain the balance. Be able to detect an attack, be able to prepare to react for those attacks, challenge and test regularly. Adopt a life cycle based approach, create a cyber risk management life cycle approach when it comes to medical devices and software. So that was the overall message on my side. And I think I've run out of time a little bit, but I'm open to questions. And if you have any specific hands-on, what should we do next? What should be the actual, this is my use case, please drop a line or look at the website, and I'm even happy to answer the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Shrikant. It's a very insightful presentation that you've given to us. Very broad as well. So, so now we'll proceed with the Q&A session. I'm just going to read out from the list. The first, okay, here we go. So a question says, how to mitigate different levels of cybersecurity from the lax to the super secure for the interconnected software program / interfaces / EMR, etc.
All right, so this is a mix of question where it just says interconnected software program and interfaces, right? So let's break it down, right? Firstly, you need to understand if a device or a system is connecting to many other interfaces, you don't rely on the other one. You have to have device level security individually. So if you look at how the regulatory thinking is, it's also you need to protect your device first, not get dependent on the other ones, because interfaces and interoperability is another topic. Now, second part is that's the first part, how do you manage or mitigate different levels of cybersecurity? Now, the levels of cybersecurity are very, very complex, because security level, it's a very different topic altogether, which is 62443 industrial control system standard. But for medical devices, it's still early stages. So what I would suggest to the person who have asked this question is, first identify what is your device or what is your software which is connecting, because connectivity is always happen and it will always increase and become more complicated. So you protect your end of the chain, and there is a lot of systems in place to make sure that the data as well as the connectivity from a cybersecurity perspective is checked at different levels. Right now, it is relying on endpoint security in hospital system, but more and more it is moving from endpoint to embedded device. So start from protecting this and then go inside out. So that would be my answer, but there's a lot more I can talk about, and if any specific questions, I can take it offline here.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Srikanth. The next question. Speak about connected medical devices. What are the common exploits or vulnerabilities in them that are most concerning?
When it comes to medical devices, right, people always think that it is all data, at the end of the day, it's only data which is there. But I'll like to tell you there are so many vulnerabilities out there, right? If you have remote firmware update or even remote software update, it is it's a common vulnerability. It's a design vulnerability when you update. You have reverse engineering attack, which is very common, which can exploit your intellectual property. You have physical attacks. You have USB ports. You have side channel attack. These are huge vectors, great vectors. You have manufacturing support, which is sometimes left unattended in a medical device, and people do remote logging. This is a source of vulnerability. You have stupid things like authentication, which is very low. Bluetooth, which is very commonly used right now, is again a source. And at the end of the day, it's all patient information, which is money, which people are looking after. So there's lots of vulnerabilities, but the key important ones are the ones I just mentioned to you, which a manufacturer or a software company has to start to think from an early stage.
Thanks for that. Okay, I think because of time, we'll take one last question here. Okay. Okay. Having extensive experience with the local healthcare regulatory bodies, right? Where do you think that our current stance is in the scope of healthcare cybersecurity among countries in the world? I think this refers to Singapore.
Okay. So if you look at I think Singapore HSA, they've done a tremendous job. There is a lot of guidance which is available. I think the last guidance was software was maintaining a life cycle approach to software as a medical device, and the whole medical software, which was in April 2020. It has a very good section on cybersecurity, and it's pretty detailed. Again, it talks about risk assessment, security controls, how do you do disclosures, how do you do this, the manufacturer's disclosure, how do you maintain it throughout the life cycle. This is, again, a growing topic, right? So US FDA has this trustworthy device, trustworthiness thing. EU has state-of-the-art cybersecurity, secured by design. These are all complex topics. You need to understand that everybody is talking the same thing. And so it's very aligned, just that the way a manufacturer meets those requirements are interpreted differently. So a manufacturer, because my functionality is different, my intended use is different, but I need to do certain things in a different way. I need to use certain security technologies, but at the end of the day, benefit versus the risk, that is the overall message. And cybersecurity is now a safety requirement. That's where the landscape is shifting.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Srikanth. I guess due to the time that we're hitting, pretty much on the dot, right? So we still have questions, but I guess that Mr. Srikanth will be able to answer them after the session by typing. Okay.
Definitely.
All right.
Definitely.
Put it back to you, Kate.
Right. Oh, I went a bit fast. Okay. All right. So before the end of this webinar, I just want to share with everyone HealthTEC upcoming webinar that's happening on 28th of May at 3 p.m. Singapore time. We have 3 invited speakers, 2 from A-Stars and 1 Dr. Wong, CEO of Web Biotechnology. It's the 3rd and final webinars of the HealthTEC IMRI webinar series. More information will be coming up to you soon, so do look out for it. And we hope to see you again in the next webinar. So with that, we have come to the end of this webinar. Thanks to our 2 speakers for the very interesting talk for today. And thank you everyone for attending and staying until the end of this webinar. So have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Srikanth.